Hello, thank you for joining today's discussion, Small Talk. Please use the Q&A button in your Zoom window to submit questions throughout the presentation. We've set aside plenty of time at the end to answer as many questions as we can. With that said, let's begin.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Small Talk. My name is Leanne Sherritt, and as you can see here, I am the speech language pathologist and the president and chief clinical officer at Expressible. Expressible is an online speech therapy provider serving families around the country. And our mission is to make life-changing speech therapy accessible to everyone, combining one-on-one therapy sessions with caregiver education and support. And as far as my background goes, I've spent over 10 years as a practicing speech language pathologist, predominantly in pediatrics. I'm one of the co-founders of Expressible. And our team has over 150 talented speech language pathologists. And I have personally been featured in a variety of places sharing just about our mission and our model and how I can help parents at home. And personally, I'm also the mother of two, a rambunctious toddler who just turned 3 and a 6-month-old who is rolling all over the place these days. Ah, there I am. Okay, perfect. Oh. So what we'll be covering today is some communication milestones, and we're going to learn about how you can support your child's speech and language development, whether it's helping them learn to talk or concerns that you might have about their speech development, so the actual sounds that they're making to talk. Either way, if you have concerns about any of those areas, this webinar is for you. We're going to cover the top communication milestones for kids up to age 5, discuss some simple techniques that you can try at home, and also talk about the signs that you might need to contact a speech therapist. We've also got some free resources to share, and we'll have plenty of time for, like John said there, Q&A, questions and answers towards the end. So let's go ahead and dive in. First, let's talk a little bit about why this topic is so important. Communication is one of life's fundamental skills, and that is really for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, it is how we express our ideas, our needs, our feelings. It's how we understand others, really the whole world around us. It's how we socialize with others, how we form relationships with peers, family, friends, colleagues. It's how we also build our confidence and our self-esteem. So really kind of finding out who we are in this world. And it's also quite critical for academic readiness and success. So what are speech and language milestones? They're basically the communication skills that children develop as they grow. And kids typically meet certain milestones at certain ages. So you can think of milestones kind of like climbing a staircase. You achieve one and then you move on to the next, and they keep building on each other from there. If your child doesn't seem to be meeting milestones on time, it can be easy to feel worried. And it's true that every child develops at their own pace, but in some cases, missing a milestone might be a sign of a delay or possibly a disorder. So that's why it's really important to know what to be looking out for. And the sooner your child gets help if they need it, then the faster they'll be able to catch up. So let's talk about taking a look at the key milestones for each age group that I mentioned, along with the ways that you can help your child develop these skills at home. So we'll start with babies around 6 to 9 months. So we're going pretty early on, pretty kind of early in the phase. Personally, my youngest is about to be 7 months, so she's right squarely in here. Believe it or not, there's actually communication milestones to be looking for at this early age. Even though your baby isn't fully talking yet, they're definitely working on their expressive language skills already. So here are some of the main milestones that I would look for at this stage. First, your baby is likely responding to their name when they hear it. So hopefully they are turning to look when they hear their name called. They're beginning to babble some simple sounds. Could be ba 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 ba, ma ma ma, da 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 da, just hearing those little kind of baby talk sounds. And overall, we want to see babies becoming more chatty with their vocalizations. And we'll look for their vocalizations and babbles to start developing more conversational tone over time. So think ba 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 ba, da 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 da, where you hear that pitch variation and pitch change as they start exploring their voice more. And they should be responding to people and their environment by using their voice more and more often. Oh, I jumped too far ahead. Okay. So, for 6 to 9 months, the best thing that you can do with your baby at this stage is to interact with them. And they may not be talking yet or even doing kind of very much, but you can still engage with them during everyday routine. So, first off, try saying their name frequently or placing it in a song. If you're in my house, we have lots of ridiculous, silly, made up songs with our kids' names in them. So, you can also do a lot in front of a mirror and say their name as you talk together. So, you might say, "Hi, Johnny. I see Johnny. There's Johnny," as you point and play together at them in the mirror. To help your child begin doing more of that babbling, you can talk to them about the toys and items that you're playing with, things that are around the house, and emphasize the first sound of that word, especially some of our easier, earlier developing sounds like b or m. So if you're playing with bubbles, which is a classic, you might say b, 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 bubbles, you got the bubbles. And to encourage your child to vocalize more, you can respond to them when they make sounds. And they'll really enjoy the positive feeling that they get when you do this. So let's say your baby sees a dog while you're out on a walk and they start making sounds, they start vocalizing. You could respond to them with what you think they could be saying. So you might say, "You're right. I see the dog. He's so fluffy." And your child might then make another sound back to you. And then you can make another statement back, and you can just keep going almost like you're having a little conversation with them. All right. So now let's move on to the 12-month stage. There's actually a lot of growth that can happen between 6 months and turning one. As a speech therapist, I'm typically looking for a 1-year-old to be able to use at least one word independently, like milk or hi. So think of the rule as one word by 1-year-old. I'm also looking for consistent use of gestures for communicating. And this might be waving hello or goodbye, pointing to something that they want. It might even be using simple signs, things like more or please. Gestures can really do a lot to promote verbal language growth. So it's important to see 1-year-olds doing this, even if they're not yet using multiple words or just kind of getting started on their words. Another thing that I would look for is the ability to play simple games with a caregiver or a family member. So games like peekaboo, pretending to blow kisses back and forth. We want to see them learning to engage with another person. Even though it just feels like you're having a sweet little interaction together, it really is helping them understand a lot of the conversational turn taking that will eventually develop for their speech and language. Some tips to grow these skills. All of these skills can be really easily practiced right at home with just anything you have around. So, for instance, you can focus on labeling items at home. and labeling items when you're out and about, running errands, kind of hanging out in the community. So if you're making a snack, go ahead and say the names of those foods as you're putting them in front of your kiddo, as you're maybe going through the cupboard or pantry. Say the names of the plates and the utensils, the cup, the bowl, the spoon, the fork, and so on. And this helps your toddler learn those words and then eventually be able to start using them. And it's always really fun to see what a child's first word ends up being. I think my son's was the name of our dog, and we'll be excited to see what our daughter's is. For gestures, make sure that you're showing your child how to use them. So you can practice waving to other people, making a sign to ask for something like that more. If your child's trying to tell you something and you aren't sure what they need, you can say, show me, to see if they'll point or gesture in some way. And of course, games like peekaboo are easy to play, super fun. They're a classic hit. Kids songs like Open Shut Them, Itsy Bitsy Spider, Twinkle Twinkle, those are particularly great too, because they incorporate the use of hand motions to get your child interacting and to doing some of that gesture imitation. And again, that gesture imitation and use, we want to see it in these early phases as becoming pretty consistent as they're working on how to get that verbal spoken language going. But that's really the main thing that we're looking for, is a back and forth interaction between you and your kids. So again, even though it feels like a game, there really is quite a bit underlying the speech and language development that's going along there. Now it's time to talk about 2-year-olds. And if you think that there was a lot of growth at age 1, hold your pants on. This is a fun stage, and it's typically when kids really start talking and communicating even more. And you'll see some pretty big milestones, like your toddler starting to use 2-word phrases. So now the rule is 2-word phrases by 2 years old. These are usually simple and pretty straightforward things like more juice, go outside, or one you might be familiar with if you've had a 2-year-old, they might say, no, mine. And by age 2, we want to see kids having about 50 words that they can say on their own. These can include people's names, names of toys and items around the house. It can include places that they like to go. And you also will look for verbs to begin showing up. So words like eat, run, play, and so on. That will be important for them to be able to start forming full sentences out of 2 words going together, a noun and a verb. And using verbs around your toddler tell you more about what they're seeing and doing, and we can do that modeling for them. So your 2-year-old will also likely start having short conversations. And these may not be very long, they could be pretty short, but they'll probably be longer than they were before when you guys were babbling about the dog on the sidewalk when they were, 6 to 9 months. So maybe you say something, your child says something back, you reply, and then your child replies. Then they're on to another topic, which is totally normal. But starting to have these simple back and forth conversations, again, is great progress for how we look to see that continued development. Some tips to help 2-year-olds grow their communication skills at home: keep modeling words and phrases for them. So you might want to practice phrases with words that they're already saying. Maybe your child has a pretty good hold on saying hi, pretty good hold on saying mama as single words. So you can go ahead and try modeling for them. Hi, mama. Hi, dada. Hi, doggy. You can also try some functional phrases that help them learn to request or make comments. So maybe go outside or more swing. When your child feels the positive reward of getting what they asked for, it motivates them to keep learning to communicate. One strategy that speech therapists use all the time, really, really common strategy at this age range, is to help them build phrases one step above what they just said. So if they did just use a single word, like more, to request, you can take the opportunity to model more swing before you give them another push on the swing. So latching on to the single word that they did say and helping show them how they can tack the next one right onto it by giving them that model and letting them hear it before you maybe complete the action for them. This is a big one too. Reading books together is another really easy way to increase your toddler's vocabulary, expose them to more words, have a nice, sit down time together. Try to read a few books a day. And it's helpful if you pick a time where they're more likely to sit and listen. So maybe at bedtime, that's when we do a lot of book reading in our house, or maybe while eating a snack while they're sitting in their chair and maybe have, good rapt attention. Research has shown that kids who read 5 books a day with their family before kindergarten are exposed to 1 million more words than kids who aren't read to. So it really can have a huge, huge positive impact on growing your child's communication just through that exposure. Moving right along to 3-year-olds. So now the skills in these milestones really keep building on each other. And for age 3, which again, I have a son who just recently turned 3, I look for kids to be able to ask and answer lots of questions. We usually call these the WH questions, might be familiar, ones that start with what, where, when, why, or who. And it's also a really important milestone for 3-year-olds to start telling you more about their ideas, like what they want to play or their feelings. If they feel sad or they feel frustrated by something, if they feel grumpy. These are more kind of abstract topics and can show just how much good language growth they might be going through at that moment in time. Your 3-year-old speech should also start sounding a little bit more mature. So instead of just, I see truck, they might say, I see a truck. Or instead of, I like dog, we might look to hear them kind of expand upon that to say, I like the dog. I like the dog. So having some of those extra words in there that make a more mature sentence. Some tips to help your child grow these skills. And this really is a super, super fun age. 3 years old, between 2 and 3, we see a huge language burst is typically what we're looking for. So to help your child grow these skills, practicing those WH questions, you can practice asking those questions throughout the day or when you're spending that time together reading a book. You can ask them what they see during a walk or ask simple questions about the story, the pictures that are in the book even. You don't necessarily have to read the words on the page all the time and ask them questions about the written story. You can simply ask them about what's going on in the pictures. That's advice I give to families all the time. We read books, books don't read us. So if your child is trying to ask you a question, help them say it and learn how questions are structured. You also can discuss your ideas or feelings so that they hear those types of words and can start using them themselves. So if you're in the sandbox, you might say, let's build a sandcastle. Or if it's bedtime, maybe I'm feeling tired. It's almost time for bed. In terms of using more mature sentences, your child can learn this by hearing you speak this way. So try to give them a consistent, grammatically correct model when you talk. All right, moving right along to 4 and 5-year-olds. So by ages 4 and 5, kids typically sound more mature and have an easier time communicating overall. They should speak in longer, More specific sentences. So instead of a 4 to 5 word sentence, maybe they're using 7 to 10 words at a time in compound or complex sentences. So they might be stringing two thoughts together in one sentence. You should also hear more complex grammar from your child during this age span. So instead of saying things like tooths, we hear them correcting that to teeth. Instead of fish, we hear fishes. Instead of rund, we hear ran. For 4 and 5-year-olds, they also can tell more organized stories. So you move out of a phase where everything feels a little bit confusing and disjointed when you're trying to follow along as a listener, and you get to a place where there's a little bit more organization. You can follow along a little bit more clearly for kiddos who are 4 and 5. So maybe they can tell you more about what they did at soccer practice, or what they, a story that they read, something that they learned at school. And they can do so from beginning to end. So, correct kind of chronological order, start to finish. And we will take a look at some ways to support those at home. So you can help develop these skills by asking them to tell you about something. Maybe it's their favorite TV show. It's hard right now. I think we're on Lucas the Spider. So we talk a lot about Lucas the Spider. Uh, Something that they did at school. That's a great question to ask. And it's especially fun if you kind of start seeing what they might be able to share at the beginning of the school year and kind of listen to how those thoughts and stories might evolve as the school year goes along. If they're giving you shorter sentences to start, you can just ask them, prompt them to tell you a little bit more. You can try asking open-ended questions. So instead of yes, no questions, where that might be the only word they reply to you with, yes or no, try to ask them, what did you do in your craft time today? What type of craft did you make? Did you play, what types of games did you play on the playground? I almost did a yes, no question there. I pivoted it. Uh, Reading together is also going to continue to help your child understand more complex sentence structures. You might move into more advanced books, ones that have a little bit more story to them. And that's another great reason to try to keep up with daily story time. Maybe you can't fit 5 in the course of a busy day, but even one, just taking that time together can continue to support this development. And for things like grammar, a lot of that can be done in the moment. And if you hear your child use a plural or a verb incorrectly, we can go ahead and take the learning right in the moment that it's happening. Gently let them know what they should have said. So if you hear them use that word, if they said, I runned on the playground, you can just model right back, oh, you ran on the playground. That sounds like fun. So as soon as you hear it, you can just kind of model it back, and that lets them hear the correct grammatical piece that they could have said instead. And sometimes it just takes practice and hearing that correct form a few times before kids get the hang of it, especially with those kind of irregular ones. The repeated exposure is particularly helpful. So if they don't kind of make the correction immediately, that's okay. That's expected. That's typical. Go ahead and keep modeling it for them, so that they can get the hang of it. All right, now we can take some time to talk about how you know if your child might need support with their communication development. Oh, I jumped ahead one slide too quickly. Okay, many parents might wonder when they should contact a speech therapist. So if you are here in the webinar, it might be because you have some questions, you're wondering about your child's speech and language development, and you might also possibly be wondering if you should contact a speech therapist at this point in time. There are a few key signs or things to look out for. First of all, if your child isn't meeting any of the age expected milestones that we covered here, it's a good idea to talk with a professional like your pediatrician or a speech therapist. at the younger end of things that we covered today, if your child hasn't said their first word by 15 months, that's a sign to go ahead and reach out to a speech therapist and you can get an evaluation started. If your child often gets frustrated when they're trying to communicate, that's another sign that they might need support. They might benefit from support. Not being able to express their needs, wants, feelings can be pretty discouraging. So it's best to get help sooner rather than later. You might also hear concerns from your child's caregivers, teachers, or pediatrician, but really the bottom line is to trust your gut. And I spend a lot of time sharing that with parents. If you have something in your gut, something nagging that has a question on your mind of whether or not your child might benefit from some support, you know your child best, better than anyone else. So if you're concerned, there's never any harm in talking to a speech therapist, which will make the jump there to talk about what to look for in a speech therapist. So if you are thinking that something is standing out to you as maybe a good thing to reach out to a speech therapist about, there are some things that you might want to keep in mind when looking for who to work with. You'll want your speech therapist to be licensed and credentialed. So the credentials there, CCC, SLP, will be what you're looking for. Speech therapists do have to have a master's degree, so you might see MS or MA in front of that credential. You'll want to look for a speech therapist that is experienced in your child's needs. So if your child has something unique about their communication development or another co-occurring disorder, something else in their medical history, you will want to investigate if the speech therapist is familiar and experienced in that. If your child is someone who potentially needs an alternative or augmentative communication device, something fairly specific like that, it will be very beneficial to their progress if the speech therapist is familiar with that type of need. And really, the scope of practice, everything that a speech therapist can work on, is pretty broad. There is a lot that goes to communicating with others, and not every therapist is an absolute expert in every corner of it. So taking that time to check if they're experienced in your child's area of need. It's going to be pretty helpful if they have convenient availability so that you can attend sessions. And that is pretty important. And the reason is covered in that next bullet point. That parent coaching aspect, the caregiver involvement, is going to be really fundamental for how you can be empowered with education and resources, know-how, going in lockstep with the speech therapist in order to continue that learning at home. And the reason that's so important is 30 or 60 minutes a week with a speech therapist is incredibly helpful for communication development. But what is even more helpful is if that speech therapist can work with you as the caregiver to learn how to continue that practice at home. Then you go from having an hour a week of input to hours every day that your child is being exposed to those helpful supports that can help them learn and grow more quickly. So that's an important piece to look for in your SLP is do they practice a caregiver education model, a caregiver involvement model where you are actively a part of the session. Now we're going to cover here some free resources that you can start using today. I'm really happy to share here Expressible's free clinically validated communication screener as a helpful tool in your toolbox. And it's always helpful to have another tool in the toolbox when it comes to raising kids. This screener offers detailed results. It identifies for you areas that might be in need of support, and it also can help recommend next steps. So parents and caregivers can access it by scanning the QR code here, or also by visiting expressible.com/self-screener. and some additional resources that Expressible is really happy to provide. After the webinar here, we will email you 2 bonus guides, including a milestone checklist and language growth tips to use at home. We have hundreds of articles covering all aspects of communication, truly from 101, sort of the most basic pieces to learn, to more in-depth milestones, maybe more in-depth on things to kind of look out for, questions that you might have. Those are on our Learning Center, which you can see the link for there, expressible.com/learning center. And then we also have tons and tons of informational and how-to demo videos on our YouTube. You may or may not see me on there. And we can be found there at Expressible. And I'm very happy to share a little bit more about Expressible if you are someone who's thinking that you might be in need of some support or an evaluation for your child. Expressible is helping thousands of families reach their communication goals. That is a part of the mission on which we founded, is creating better access to the highest quality care possible. We have over 150 speech therapists with 10 plus years on average of experience. Incredibly proud to have over 3,500 5-star reviews, garnering a near perfect score there. And today we accept over 250 insurances, incredibly important for families who are looking to access care. And I'm very proud to say that over 90% of the children who work with us make clinical progress towards their goals. In addition to that, another just stamp of approval there, we are the recipient of the Joint Commission's Gold Seal of Approval. And that is an additional kind of external quality validation organization for healthcare entities in the United States. So we're very proud to have that as well. So if you're experiencing any concerns for your child's communication development prior to this webinar or after this webinar, we would love to be a supportive resource. You can visit our website and schedule an evaluation with the perfect speech therapist for your family by visiting expressible.com. Okay. So we made it through a lot of content, and I want to thank all of you for spending this time with me today. I truly, truly love being able to share how we can support kids in their communication skills. It's so fundamental to help set them up to their best success possible. We're incredibly passionate about that. And also helping parents and families understand how to know when intervention might be needed. So many studies have shown that the earlier speech therapy begins, the better the outcomes for kids. My goal is that you walk away today feeling more confident in how to help your child. So if there's anything Expressible can do to help, please reach out and let us know. We'd love to stay in touch. But now it's time to take any questions that you might have.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Leanne. Just a quick reminder for the room that at the bottom of your Zoom window, there is a button labeled Q&A, and we encourage you to submit your questions there. We've received a few already throughout today's presentation. And the first one is, Leanne, how would you convince a friend or family member to seek out services?
This is a really good question. I understand it can feel like a pretty tricky, difficult question. This is not uncommon. We have heard this a fair amount of times over over the course of working with families through the years. So you might be in a child's life either as another caregiver, another partner, or just someone close to the family, and you might have concerns for the child's speech and language development. Entering that conversation can understandably be a little gentle. We want to be a little gentle about it. Transparently, as therapists, we like to take a lot of time sitting with and thinking about the emotions that come along with a caregiver maybe going through the evaluation process and discovering that their child needs a support that they didn't previously know that they needed. So if you have someone in your life whose child you're concerned about, It's a good idea now that you're maybe armed with information. You could offer some of these pieces as a little bit of probes. So I'll just say, for instance, if you have a 2-year-old somewhere in your life and you notice that they're not only not saying 2-word phrases yet, but perhaps they're not saying many words at all, you might kind of start by asking, "Oh, has that kiddo?" Well, let's say Johnny again. Has Johnny been using any fun new words lately? Oh, that's so interesting. I was reading a blog the other day that mentioned it's. I use that a lot actually, is kind of referencing a blog that you read. Maybe it was one of our blogs, maybe it was this webinar, but I was reading a blog the other day that mentioned 2-year-olds should be saying some phrases, and I wasn't sure if Johnny had been doing that yet. They said in that blog that it can be pretty easy to access a speech evaluation, and that the sooner that you tend to do that, the better. um, have you guys ever had any concerns about Johnny's speech and language development? So maybe kind of get a few questions, a few open-ended questions to get them sort of talking about it. They might already have a thought in their head. They might already be chewing on that, and potentially just hearing the support of someone else say that they had some information that could help support the family. Another voice that kind of says, "Hey, it sounds like it's, a pretty accessible thing to do. It sounds like getting an evaluation can be pretty easy." That might just kind of alleviate the pressure and help them take that next step, sort of helping them see reduced barriers. Another easy thing is, if it feels like a big leap to kind of reach out to a speech therapist directly, it's always helpful to encourage anyone to kind of have you chatted with your pediatrician about that? They might have some ideas for you, and hopefully there is a pediatrician in their life who can be familiar with the milestones and offer some good advice about whether or not the pediatrician feels like they agree and they would recommend a speech and language evaluation.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question, how can I be a caregiver and help myself and help my autistic family members? It sounds like this person has a lot going on.
Yes, this again, this is not uncommon. Every family is busy, but some families have unique constraints and unique things that are happening on a daily basis that can make it feel pretty tough to consider playing such an active role in helping their child's communication development. The speech therapist, what we love to do is we love to partner with families if the individual is in need of, speech therapy services. We want to partner with families to help understand what those constraints are. We want to understand daily routines. We want to hear about the difficult moments. What are the moments where everything seems to break down, where, kiddo might be particularly upset on a regular basis because it's very possible that communication is playing a negative impact to the ease of the day if they're less able to communicate what it is that they want or need. So we want to partner to find out what those hard moments are so that we can um, problem solve those in particular. And we're going to do our best. And this is something that, again, I would encourage you to look for if you are working with a speech language pathologist. I would encourage you to look for someone who's going to help you incorporate practice into your everyday routine. So it's not going to be super useful for a speech therapist to simply hand you, a bunch of flashcards and say, good luck practicing these at home by yourself. It's going to be much more helpful if they can partner with you to say, okay, when you guys are needing to get somewhere in the car and that triggers, a difficult moment, let's build a visual model to help outline the steps of everything that we have to do before we get in the car so that your daughter is able to follow along with a visual support, maybe grow their understanding. So that is really the most important piece is growing communication development doesn't need to be hours of your day. It's about finding small moments that are already happening in your day where we could maybe make some small changes together to make the most of that time. So, having breakfast in the morning, getting dressed and ready to go out the door, having bath time, brushing teeth, getting ready to go to bed. Those are all opportunities where we're together already. It doesn't need to be another arduous task on the plate. Um, and really, again, that is if you're currently working with a speech therapist and that is not something that they're doing, or you're having a hard time finding that window based off what they're telling you, um, feel able to ask. Feel able to ask them, let them know what you feel like you're needing in order to make practice more realistic, in order to make support more realistic for your family. That's a great question. Could probably talk for a long time about that, but I hope that is helpful.
Excellent. I've been trying to start speech therapy for my son, but the process and getting a referral can be hectic. Do you have any advice?
Yes. So if it feels hectic, um, we can, you know, if you've tried reaching out to your pediatrician and that kind of feels hectic and you're not able to get them to give you the referral that you'd like, you can reach out directly to a speech therapist. Us here at Expressful, we try to do a lot to support, someone getting referral that they might need for the process. It is true that there are some insurance plans that require a referral in order to cover the care. So you could try the path of reaching out directly to a speech therapy entity like Expressful, just for instance, to help with that coordination. Um, but that, yes, we are doing our part to try to make that easy. We kind of view that as one of the barriers to care. That families might experience. And different doctors' offices do things differently. It presents a few challenges in the workflow, but we do our best to kind of work with families to hunt down what it takes to get started.
This next one is one that we hear quite a bit. What if you've been told to wait and see how your child's communication develops?
Okay. I have to admit that this one is one of my pet peeves a little bit. And I think that what I don't love about the advice of wait and see is that we could be just really missing out on valuable time. Um, Kiddos' brains are growing and developing the most rapidly early on in their life, particularly before the age of 3. They are forming new neural connections faster than the speed of light. Every moment they're sponging up something new, and their brain is really kind of built for that speed at that time. So if we wait and see if a concern that we have kind of peters out and resolves on its own, or doesn't, for the kiddos that the concern does not resolve, we have potentially missed a window of rapid development that we could have been capitalizing on with the right supports. So I tend to disagree with the advice of wait and see. My advice is that it's never harmful to get a speech and language evaluation. It can provide you with either the insight that your child might benefit from support, or it could provide you with the peace of mind that they're on track. Everything's looking good. The speech therapist might be able to give you some things to keep an eye out for as they continue developing. But regardless, you will be able to walk away with next steps from that process. So I personally feel there's a lot more benefit to not waiting and seeing, but talking with a pediatrician or reaching out directly to a speech therapist Again, like I said earlier during the webinar, trust your gut. If there is something that is nagging in your brain and you feel that it could use a look, I would say go ahead and have a professional take a look. So yes, I don't tend to love the wait and see advice personally.
Great. This next one, do some kids grow out of a speech delay, or do you always need a speech therapist?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it ties a little bit to the previous answer, which is some kids might be demonstrating what is ultimately a delay, where the acquisition of a new skill, them kind of learning a new skill, just is slightly behind what we would expect it to be, and it potentially will end up resolving. However, it's pretty tricky to know without a professional taking a look if that's going to be the case or not. So, a speech language pathologist with all the background and education, schooling, knowledge, experience that they have will be able to understand more clearly the whole picture of a child's communication development. And that picture together can help indicate whether or not it looks like just a delay that is on its way to resolving, or that they see the groundwork and the underlying skills that it's more likely to see the concern resolve. But for the kiddos where that isn't the case, again, it's difficult to know without having a professional take a look. And so that kind of ties into not waiting and seeing because we could be missing out on opportunities for the children whose concerns won't resolve on their own, and ultimately will need support to meet those milestones.
This next one is tied to some of those milestones you discussed today. I've heard my 18-month-old say words here and there, but they aren't consistent. Is that normal?
That is normal. That is pretty normal for an 18-month-old to say words here and there. If you think back to when we were covering that 12-month range between 1 and 2, we noted that around 1, we do hope to see at least one consistent word. As you start to get halfway between 1 and 2 at the 18-month mark, I would hope to have at least a handful of consistent words. And it's okay if they have additional words that are a little bit less consistent than others. You might see some words come and go across the weeks, but in general, the trend that we're looking for is just upward. So across that age range, week over week, we would hope to see an additional word kind of make its appearance, even if it might not be there the next week consistently. And then maybe the week after that, you hear the first signs of another word, even if it kind of goes away for a week and then comes back. That's pretty normal to see that inconsistency. Kids are learning those building blocks. But again, I would say 18 months old, I would be looking for, if I was evaluating that child, I'd be looking for a handful of consistently applied words, words that they're using independently. And what I mean when I say that is independent, you don't have to say it to them first. They're able to kind of come up and say it to you fully on their own without a model. So, when you're taking your walk, they point to the dog and say doggy all on their own. That would be like an independent word. But yeah, so I would be looking for a handful of consistent words and then just an upward trend of new words starting to emerge, even if they're not consistent. But yes, overall, that is typical for that age.
Awesome. We still have just a couple more. This next one, my son just turned 2 and isn't really talking yet, but people keep telling me that's normal because boys start talking later than girls.
Okay, this one has a little bit to it. It is true, statistically through research, that boys and their communication skills are they tend to trend a little bit later than girls, but we're talking in the range of months, not years. So, you know, if a kiddo is 2 and they're not really talking yet, that's that's a whole year behind, what we would expect to see that first word emerge at 1, not just a couple of months behind. um, so that I would make the suggestion that a speech and language evaluation would be a great idea to see if there's additional support that could help language comprehension and expression at that point in time. So that's a two-part answer. Yes, boys do talk a little bit later than girls, but in the realm of months, not years. So if there's a concern for a young boy's speech and language development, I would go ahead and get it assessed. It is also true that speech and language issues are more common for boys. Statistically, we do see them in little boys more often than in girls. So that's sort of an additional tally in the realm of go ahead and seek an evaluation would be a great way to just know what next steps to take for support.
Awesome. And then I think this might be the last one we have here in the chat today. But that is, what early signs should I look for to understand how this child is trying to communicate, even if they're not using words yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. It could depend on it might depend a little bit on the age of the child specifically. If it's around that 2 year, if it's really anywhere between this 1 to 5 age range that we've talked about. If a kiddo is not yet using words, we might look to see them using gestures. We talked a fair amount about that in the webinar. So that's another form of communication. It's not with their mouth, it's not verbal, but a gesture is a form of communication. Things like pointing, reaching, reaching for objects that they want. Some kiddos might take your hand and pull you over to where it is that they're interested in going or something that they're interested in seeing. That might be in place of using a verbal request. If that is happening pretty commonly for a kiddo older than 2, I would recommend a speech and language evaluation if they are using a lot of that pulling strategy to communicate what it is that they want. Other things you might look for underlying their attempts at communication is initiation, and I'll explain that a little bit more. Initiation of communication can look a lot of different ways. Sometimes it might just be moving into someone's physical space. So they might kind of crowd you, maybe make eye contact to get you to realize that they need something from you, even though they're not able to tell you the word that they need. That's an initiation of the communication. They might hand you something that they want you to open. So that's a little bit of a nonverbal communication format. Some kiddos might just be using their eyes to initiate communication. So they might just be attempting to establish eye contact. Kiddos might do other forms of physical manipulation. So I've worked with kiddos where their strategy was to grab the person's face in order to get them to look and connect and kind of try to understand that they needed something. If they're not yet verbalizing a word, do we hear them vocalizing? So do we hear them kind of babbling, playing with sounds, making communicative attempts? So there's a lot of different ways that a child who's not yet speaking might still be trying to communicate. And again, I would say a speech language pathologist kind of taking a full look at the whole picture will be able to help a little bit more identify what they see, a kiddo doing that are fundamental building blocks that can be grown into other more mature forms of communication, whether that's verbal communication or communication with an assistive device.
Excellent. We still have a few more minutes of time, so we have a couple more questions coming in. Please don't be shy. Feel free to put those in the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. This next question is regarding hearing loss. Can hearing loss affect speech development? And a two-parter, how long after getting tubes should speech be improving?
Yeah, this is a great question. So on the first one, yes, hearing loss can affect speech and language development. Fundamentally, if a kiddo is not able to hear the inputs and the words and the sounds as clearly, maybe as they should be able to, they will be a little bit more inhibited at turning around and using it. It's very common for kiddos with frequent ear infections, middle ear infections, to need speech and language therapy for at least, a short amount of time to assist with catch up. But that second question, how long would you expect to see, uh, if they had tubes placed to see their speech and language improve? I would look for that improvement within 6 months. So I wouldn't expect it to take, a full year for a little one to catch up, but you should look for those some early signs of improvement after those first few months, and then kind of look for some more complete catch up within 6 months. So if they haven't kind of caught up yet to what some of those age expected milestones are, it could be a good idea to just get some additional support, help catch them up and kind of meet that milestone so that we're confident that they are kind of entering the next phase fully equipped with everything that they could need.
How can we distinguish between a speech delay and a broader communication disorder in a nonverbal child? And what intervention should be prioritized while we're still figuring that out?
This is a fantastic question. So distinguishing between a speech delay and a broader communication disorder, um, like we said, there's a few pieces there that might take a more in-depth look and a complete evaluation to be able to understand um, if a kiddo might be missing some of the fundamental building blocks, or if they are just kind of a tiny bit behind the fundamental building blocks. So when we outlined that speech and language milestones are kind of like a staircase, it's pretty hard to skip steps on the staircase. We really kind of need that step before to be able to get up to the next one. Occasionally, children might have scattered skills. To me, that would be indicative of a need for further support if we have sort of patchwork skills, something over here, but a more fundamental, earlier piece of communication development missing. That to me would indicate that it's more likely to be possibly a disorder rather than a delay. Um, and so past this age group in particular, this youngest age group, 0 to 3, where a lot of the fundamentals of communication development are happening. Um, if we're kind of not on track for that 0 to 3 age range with those milestones, it becomes a little bit more likely that what we're looking at is more of a disorder rather than a delay. And so the need to kind of get support started just becomes um, more beneficial. Again, the big takeaway item, if you have one from me here today, is the sooner we get a professional kind of taking a closer look and supporting, the more beneficial it will be to outcomes. So I probably sound like a broken record at this point, but there's kind of no harm in seeking a speech evaluation. If you have something in your gut, a speech and language therapist can really be the tool to help understand, are we looking at a delay or are we looking at a disorder? If we're looking at a delay, what are things that I can just do to help catch up? Will I need therapy in order to catch up, or are there things that I can just do independently at home? And then if it's looking more like a disorder, which, again, understanding the full picture of it, every kid is unique. So taking a closer look at the individual picture can be the most helpful. But if you are looking at a speech and language disorder, um, the plan of care that the speech language therapist helps develop will be tailored and individualized to what it is that the kiddo needs support with.
Fantastic. And that does bring us to the end of the Q&A. We have a few more individualized questions, and we'll reach out to each of you individually following the session today. But That is a wrap on questions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for joining me this Tuesday evening or late afternoon, maybe depending on where you are. I want to thank you all again for spending this time with me. I think arming yourself with information is an excellent first step to be able to help grow your child's communication development, or maybe another child in your stratosphere, growing to their full potential. And Expressful is really happy to help along the way however we can. So please reach out and let us know what you might need.